This, I'm in and out of this. When they get into the commandment that I command on testing you hunger, then by feeding you with manna, with which neither you nor your ancestors were acquainted, in order to make you understand that one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes out of the mouth of the Lord. Where have you heard that before?
Jesus.
Who's he talking to?
Satan.
Satan. Okay. Times of trial and testing, and okay, Jesus harkens right back to the wilderness experience. Okay. The clothes on your back did not wear out, your feet did not swell these 40 years. No, then in your heart, as a parent disciplines a child, so the Lord your God disciplines you. All right, folks, let's back up a little bit. He humbled you by letting you hunger, then by feeding you with manna. It has been said in this class that God does not tempt us, but that things happen, and then God works with us to strengthen our faith and to bring us out of circumstances, okay? There's that part of the Lord's Prayer that we say, lead us not into temptation, and we wonder about that, as if God is the one who's going to tempt us. Here in Deuteronomy, God says, oh yeah, I did that. I did that.
If he humbled you, is that the same thing as being tempted?
Well, no, letting them go hungry. He let them go hungry.
But did he really?
Well, he said so.
Well,
There, I mean, it's in your Bible. What can I say? God, in several places in Deuteronomy, God is going to claim the initiative in putting people in bad circumstances.
well, just leading them out of Egypt is going to lead them into a bad circumstance.
Well, that's true, but then leaving them in Egypt would have been bad too.
Well, if they'd obeyed, they wouldn't have been. Well, they did. They were there.
Yeah.
That would have been bad too.
So what do you think? You start running into roadblocks and difficulties and things like that. Is God putting that on you, or is God allowing it to happen?
Or is he using that?
Is he using it?
Right. I mean, that's what we're told.
Yeah.
That God does not do things to us. Things happen to us, and how we react to those things.
Right. Okay. Your parents, right? Okay. So you got kids, and God says, what does God say? God says, I'm disciplining you like a good parent. Okay? Well, good parents don't have the land swallow you up or consume you with fire or put poisonous snakes in your camp or, God's definition of a good parent is kind of interesting. Now, all of us have seen our kids do dumb stuff, right? And we've seen them be rebellious and all of that sort of thing. We might have said from time to time, you do that again, I'm going to kill you, It's a rhetorical thing, but...
I said so. Because I said so.
Because I said so? Yes, yes. And there's a lot of because I said so in here.
Exactly.
Okay. What is good parenting? I mean, if I know that my kids are making some really bad decisions, hanging around with the wrong crew, am I going to let them go to hell in a handbasket and then say, okay, let's fix it?
I'm going to try not to.
I'm going to steer them away if I can, or I'm going to intervene somehow. We had one child that hung out with a bad crowd, And so our solution was to invite them to dinner.
Did it work?
Oh yeah, it worked. Let me tell you, it worked so well because they came from really bad households. Okay, so they came to our house, and all of a sudden they're getting a good meal, and we're having good conversation around the table, and it got to the point where if my kids screwed up, they'd come and tell us.
They changed.
Huh? They changed.
Some did.
Yeah, they changed, and they knew if they got beat up in a fight that they could come and we'd patch them up. You know,
Was it a fast change or a slow change?
it was pretty quick. It really was. It was pretty quick. They saw that this is a place they could go to. They could say things. They could be honest. They
You
could.
weren't so bad after all.
No, they were bad. They were kids in bad circumstances,
Right.
and they found out what a good circumstance looked like. You know, so everyone's.
They
yeah.
were able to experience what the good situation was.
Yes.
These people are not yet experiencing that.
No.
They're just being told.
Yeah, they're just being told.
It's gonna be great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is what you can get away with before they become teenagers, you know?
But the funny, it isn't funny, I have to say it. The bad thing about that was, we lived right in the parsonage right across from the church, exactly across from the church. And like we said, we had one daughter who, had to work on her a little bit more than the others. But the church people said, you can't let those teenagers in your house because they're from bad families. And we said, we're going to let them in the house. And then some of the kids started coming to church, and all of
Right.
a sudden the tune changed when they started coming to church.
That's a great story.
Yeah. Well, it happened with one of the churches,
Oh, gosh.
actually, on that charge. There's a little country church that was about to die. It only had 5 people coming. In fact, when I was appointed there, they didn't tell me I had 2 churches. They just told me I had 1 church, and they expected me to. The conference told me I only had 1 church,
Oh, my
and they
God.
wanted me to close the other one, and the people there did not want to close, and so we tried to figure out, they want to stay open. They want it to be a church, okay? So they're praying that they could stay open. There was one lady in the church who was very cantankerous, didn't like other people getting in the church, didn't want the church to grow, wanted to control everything, and she got too sick to come. So they took over, the rest of them took over, and one of them, and they decided that they would be in ministry to the kids in the neighborhood. Well, these were inner city country kids. They were not latchkey because their parents wouldn't give them a key, and they were rough. And they're just ripe for juvenile detention. They were just ripe for getting pregnant, never go to college, anything like that. And we took them on. And they found that the church was a safe haven. It was a good place for them to come. And when we had our youth group meet, we would take away the knives and the handcuffs, and we'd, and then we'd get on with the lesson. So. They were, one of the best things that happened was I came back years later for a homecoming, and those kids showed up at the homecoming. They were not in jail, okay? They had, graduated school, and I just saw that as a great success for that little ministry. And that church grew. We went from 5 to 15 and got an award for being the fastest growing church in the conference, percentage-wise. So, the thing is, that kind of parenting isn't the kind of parenting that God describes for what a good parent is. If you're using God as a model from the Old Testament, it's not a good model. You got to get all the way to Proverbs before you start seeing the kind of modeling that is appropriate. So be very careful about this. Some people, can take something like this and say, well, I'm going to put my kids in a bad spot and then rescue them. because that's how God works. And once again, don't necessarily know that that's how God works. Okay? Hasn't been my experience. I didn't need God to get me in a bad situation. I was real good at that myself. So, okay. The clothes on your back did not wear out, your feet did not swell these 40 years. Know then in your heart that as a parent disciplines his child, so the Lord your God disciplines you. Doesn't say good parent, bad parent, just says as a parent. Okay? Therefore, keep the commandments of the Lord by walking in his ways, by fearing him, which is saying really by respecting God. There's a lot of parenting models were based on kids having a fear of their parents. Okay? And I don't know why they kept that word in the translation, because it's better to say respect, better understanding of what was intended. But this God certainly did a lot of things to make them afraid of him. Okay? Keep the commands, walking and fearing him, for the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land flowing with streams, springs and underground waters welling up in valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines, fig trees, and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land where you may eat bread without scarcity, where you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron, and from whose hills you may mine copper. You shall eat your fill and bless the Lord your God for the good land that he has given you. All right. Tripped up a bit. Okay. The copper, yeah. They haven't hit the Iron Age yet. This is Bronze Age. This is not Iron Age. Okay? So when they start talking about being able to mine iron, they haven't really been doing that yet. So you can see that this is a much later composition. Take care that you do not forget the Lord your God by failing to keep his commandments, his ordinances, and statutes that I am commanding you today, when you have eaten your fill and built your fine houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, then do not exalt yourself, forgetting the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, who led you through the great and terrible wilderness, an arid wasteland with poisonous snakes and scorpions. He made water flow for you from flint rock, and fed you in the wilderness with manna that your ancestors did not know, to humble you and to test you, and in the end to do you good. Do not say to yourself, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth, but remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, so that he may confirm his covenant that he swore to your ancestors, as he is doing today. If you do forget the Lord your God and follow other gods to serve and worship them, I solemnly warn you today that you shall surely perish like the nations that the Lord is destroying before you, so shall you perish, because you would not obey the voice of the Lord your God. Okay. Times of trial can be defining. If you've gone through really hard times, you know what I'm talking about. You've gone through crisis in life, you've gone through desperation. Before my call to ministry, we were dragged through a time like that. And out of work, and really had a hard time. But it was almost like the wilderness experience. We did not have an infusion of wealth or anything like that during that time. But from day to day experience, somehow God helped us to survive. Things would happen, okay? I had been working for the National Guard, and the funding ran out. so they canceled my orders. And things got really desperate because I was working on my doctorate and all of that. We had 4 kids and a big mortgage, had just bought a house. And, we were really scraping to get by. And just when things were horrible, the horriblest, where we just ran out of resources, all of a sudden the Guard would bring me back on for a week, or I would get a contract to teach technical writing for the government, and I'd go off to then do these courses, and that was good money. Peggy took a job at McDonald's, and yep, unlike some people, she really did work at McDonald's, and
Amen.
set all-time records for cashiering and stuff. So she was very good. But there was I remember one particular. There was a couple of things happened. We were really down. We were paying our bills barely, okay, and didn't have any money for food. And this guy calls me from the church and says, I have a sizable garden and we've already picked it and it's going, second crop. Do you think you and your family could use that? I said, well, we might, and we hit that thing like locusts. And got some canning jars, a lot of canning jars. And we were just overwhelmed with food, just at that time when we had run out. Okay, and I prayed, look, God, I'm not trying to complain, but I just want you to know we're kind of short on food. There came the call, and we had so many cases of canned vegetables that we didn't have room in the house to store them. So I put some shelves in the crawl space under the house and stacked these cartons of stuff. And while I'm down there under the house, I said, Lord, this is overwhelming. We've never had so much food in our house, but I just, not complaining, but I just want you to know that we don't have any meat. Guy calls me from the church, okay, and said, you remember you helped me build that chicken coop? I said, yeah. He came down from Poughkeepsie, New York. He worked for IBM and got transferred down here and felt like if I'm going to be in North Carolina, I'm going to learn a little bit about agriculture. And he wanted a chicken. He wanted to raise chickens. So I'd never built a chicken coop before, but he asked me if I would help him out. I was out of work, so I helped him out. And he says, I've got about 5 chickens here that I can't fit in my freezer. Could you use them? I said I might. And we got those chickens, and we were fed. And it wasn't like, well, it really was in many respects overwhelming. But what was happening day by day, gig by gig, we were learning that we could depend on the Lord. Of course, I want you to understand this too. Even in the most desperate times, we were still tithing whatever we had. Okay? I'm not saying that if you tithe, God's going to make you rich. But
He'll give you a peace that you can't understand.
that's right.
Amen.
That's right. And the return has been much greater than anything we've given. It's just that assurance of knowing. God is not a stupid investor. God's not a stupid investor. You could have all these people who tell you about the market going up and down and everything, and I've watched them on TV, and they contradict each other all the time. God knows how to make an investment. And if you're paying off, that's not an investment that God wants to see fail. So, just think about it. But, we got through that. 10 months of unemployment. And what God was telling us, what God finally told me through all of that, was that if I got a parish as a part-time student pastor, that we would not starve. So I did become a part-time student pastor, and my salary wasn't nearly as much as the mortgage on the house that I was trying to pay for. Barely enough to cover the phone bill. It was nothing. And, we made it through that experience too. We did. So I know what it's like to go through a wilderness thing, and understand that when you're going through those kinds of things, and you see that God is working with you, pacing along, not getting too far ahead of you, just pacing along, okay? Then you know that you have a companion in the midst of those trials, and understand also that there is a goal. There's going to be a promised land of some sort that God's bringing you to, okay? So when you get into those trials, just understand that God is going to look out for you, and and try and get some guidance on where you're headed. Okay? Just let God know that, I'm going to stick with you through thick and thin, and I just pray that you'll do the same. And it'll work. It'll work. You'll learn stuff. And these people went through times of desperation. You will too. Okay? But don't be intimidated by it. So, but God is also saying to them, I'm bringing you into a great land. Don't forget. Don't forget, don't forget, don't forget. Okay? Because it's people in foxholes will pray much more earnestly than people in their dining room. Okay? I'm just saying. So don't forget I was with you in that foxhole. All right? I remember it. Because I've been in that foxhole. But just know that something is waiting for you, that God is going to be using your experience not only as a blessing to you, but as a blessing to others. And I really think that if I had been called to ministry in better times, I might not have accepted that call. But I can tell you this, that I had enough faith that just right after my call to ministry, when we were really in very dire straits, I got a call from the Pentagon, and they wanted me to come work for them. Now, at that time, I was a captain, okay? But it was from the National Guard, and they wanted me to come up and be part of their recruiting effort, because they knew that I had created the tuition assistance program for the National Guard in North Carolina. And they really wanted me to come work for them up there. And what they were promising me was a full career in the Pentagon with no deployments, and I could have stayed there all the way up to colonel. And I called my wife, and I called the district superintendent, and Peggy was ready to stay the course, and the DS, I asked him, and I knew he wasn't going to have anything, because this is like in, October or something. And I said, you're not going to have anything. And so I called the DS, and he said, yeah, something's coming open in January. January. And the guy could not believe that I turned him down. He could not believe that I turned him down. But God wasn't bringing me to the Pentagon. Okay? And it would have been a really good gig, but that wasn't where I was headed. Okay? But if he had not brought us through those previous months of desperation, I wouldn't have had the courage to turn that person down. So, anyway. You all been through wildernesses? Times of desperation, times of abandonment, times of things you counted on didn't work out, you know? So you know what I'm talking about. But I'm just saying, stay the course, learn the lessons that God's trying to teach you. I'm not saying that God will drag you through desperation, but God knows when you're desperate. Okay? The Pentateuch is about a very, very primitive understanding of who God is and how God works. Okay? If you really want to know who God is and how God works, two things have to happen. You got to read the rest of the Bible. Okay? And the other thing is, you got to have some faith and live it. And as you experience it, you'll find that your faith is going to be strengthened through all of that. You'll understand what's going on. But I don't know. We get some pretty big misconceptions about who God is and how God works in these early encounters with who God is, and it's really easy. You know, when you're a kid, it's really easy to misinterpret what your parents are doing and why they're doing it. Okay? And it's really easy to put a misinterpretation on all of that. But good parents, ultimately, kids will look back on it and say, you know, I was really stupid. And if you're having problems with your kids, wait till they grow up and sit by the phone. Because you will get that call. Okay. I'm so sorry.
On the other hand, there are a lot of good parents whose kids go the wrong way.
Yes, they do.
And they've done everything right.
Yes.
And things don't work out for the good.
That's true. That's true. And all you can do is like the father and the prodigal son is stand by the door and look down the road, hope and pray, because just understand too that God knows where they are, and if you keep praying for them, they may figure it out, and it may take them a long time, but they may figure it out. Okay.
And I agree with you, but I also know that there's plenty of parents that have prayed and things have not turned out the way that they prayed for.
That's true.
I'm just being the devil's advocate here.
Glad you like the guy.
There's a lot of that in it sometimes.
We're gonna get into that devil's advocacy thing in the sermon.
And
Yeah.
I'm not saying any, but I think you need to be aware that everything doesn't always turn out
No, it doesn't.
like you want it to.
That's
It's
see,
not.
that's the other thing. While there are things in the Pentateuch that we're looking at and saying, you know, it isn't always this way, or this is an odd way of, or this isn't a well-developed faith kind of thing. There's a lot of good advice in the book of Proverbs, but the promises that you see in Proverbs don't always come out. They don't.
Right.
Okay? Because life is life. Life is life. And sometimes you can have, you know, on the news all the time, you have some really good kid, and all of a sudden somebody takes their life, and you know, why? You know, why? And the answers don't come real easily.
Oh, that's when I have to tell myself, we don't know the good plan, we don't know the good picture.
We really don't. But do you still have faith in the midst of it? See, the problem is people confuse faith with assurance. Okay? But you can't have faith if you don't have doubts.
Absolutely.
You can't have faith
in
in
faith if you don't have doubts. And
Right.
you know, in our lessons that we're talking about faith, that was one of the things they say, if you don't have doubts, there's something wrong.
That's correct. That's correct. And there should always be those challenges. There should always be those challenges, because that's how we grow. And if anything, that is the lesson of the wilderness experience, is that you go through something like this and you come to a better understanding of who you are and who God is, and that, you know, you're together on a journey. You learn that stuff, okay? So, anyway, I hear the music playing up there. So, we're going to shut it off here, but I just want you to know that if you're going through a tough time, don't think that God's abandoned you, because that's not the case. Okay, God bless you. I'll see you next week. No, I won't either. I'm going to be at a different church next week. So you'll just have to
that's right.
wait until I get back. But God bless you all.
Well, I've got something I'd like to bring up this morning. Lee Holder